Hi there, it is story time on Monday. I hope you've had a super weekend. I hope that you have hit the ground on Monday running, and I hope that you're going to have a absolutely amazing week. Today's story time is one of the slightly more heavy, more somber stories. I don't know if you know the name David Foster Wallace. Hey Marissa, how are you doing? So good to see you. And howdy. Very good to see you too. Today's story, I've just said, is a bit more somber, a bit more heavy. I think there's some really nice wisdom in the story too, but definitely not any of the upbeat stories today. Today is a bit of a heavy story. Do you know the name David Foster Wallace? Have you ever heard the name David Foster Wallace? Today's story is his famous speech called This Is Water. David Foster Wallace. DB Rochelle, how are you doing? And Israela, I hope you are very well. And thank you so much. I am flippin' convinced that I'm going to have an absolutely amazing week. Thank you very, very much. So to give you an idea of who David Foster Wallace is, as per usual, I will read a couple of his quotes. Let me know if he's on your radar. Do you know anything about him? Do you know anything about his famous speech called This Is Water? The first quote from David Foster Wallace is, "Everybody is identical in their secret, unspoken belief that way deep down, they are different from everyone else." Everyone is identical in how they think they are different from everyone else. So yes, we are all different, but it comes down to maybe we're not as different as we think. The next little quote from David Foster Wallace is, "The truth will set you free, but not until it is finished with you." The truth will set you free, but not until it is finished with you. I kind of like that one as well. Gives you a bit of a look into the man's mind. This one specifically, and I think at some points in time we can all kind of relate to this. And I remember as a kid kind of having similar thoughts to these, not quite the same, but how odd I can have all of this inside of me, and to you it's just words. How odd that I can have all of this inside of me, and to you it's just words. We all have this inner experience, and in our own inner experience we feel different and separated from other people having their own inner experience, and it's often just very difficult or complicated to translate to other people what it is that we are feeling or experiencing. This one was really good. I really enjoy this quote. He says, "Everything I have ever let go of has claw marks on it." Everything I have ever let go of has claw marks on it. David Foster Wallace was definitely a very deep thinker about the human experience. This is a longer quote. I'll read you this longer quote quickly before I get into today's story. "You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't." You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race. And this quote is pretty much what his whole speech is about. So this is by no means his whole speech, This Is Water, because that would be a bit too long for me to read to you quickly. But this is, to me, the most important parts of his speech, This Is Water. Yeah, that particularly struck me as well, hey? Everything I've ever let go of has claw marks on it, and that is just so accurate of the human condition. It is such a skill to learn how to let go gracefully, and it takes us a bit of a time to get there, if we ever do. Hey Judy, so good to see you pop in. I hope that you are well. I hope you had a great weekend. It's really, really nice to see you. Okay, so as I said, a little bit of a more somber, heavy story today, and you'll very quickly see why. But there is a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom inside of today's story. I hope that you enjoy David Foster Wallace's speech called "This is Water." On September 12, 2008, David Foster Wallace took his own life, becoming a kind of a patron saint of the tortured genius myth. Just 3 years prior to his suicide, he stepped onto the podium at Kenyon College and delivered one of the most timeless graduation speeches of all time, the only public talk he ever gave on his views of life. This is the talk that became famous as the "This is Water" speech. Wallace's opinion on how easily we form beliefs are I'm starting with Wallace's opinion on how easily we form beliefs that are just plain wrong. His words are, "Here is just one example of the total wrongness of something I tend to be automatically sure of. Everything in my own immediate experience supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid and important person in existence. We rarely think about this sort of natural, basic self-centeredness because it is so socially repulsive. But it is pretty much the same for all of us. It is our default setting, hardwired into our boards at birth. Think about it. There is no experience that you have that you are not the absolute center of. The world as you experience it is there in front of you or behind you, or to the left or to the right of you, or on your TV or your monitor, and so on. Other people's thoughts and feelings have to be communicated to you somehow, but your own are so immediate, so urgent, and so real. Please don't worry that I'm about to lecture you about compassion or other directedness or the so-called virtues. This is not a matter of virtue. It is a matter of my choosing to do the work of somehow altering or getting free of my natural, hardwired default setting, which is to be deeply and literally self-centered, and to see and interpret everything through this lens of self. People who can adjust their natural default setting this way are often described as being well adjusted, which I suggest to you is not an accidental term. And then his view in the same speech on the double-edged sword of the intellect. It is extremely difficult to stay alert and attentive, instead of getting hypnotized by the constant monologue inside your own head. It may be happening right now, in fact. 20 years after my own graduation, I have come gradually to understand that the liberal arts cliché about teaching you how to think is actually shorthand for a much deeper, more serious idea. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from experiences. Because if you cannot exercise this kind of choice in adult life, you will be totally hosed. Think of the old cliché about the mind being an excellent servant, but a terrible master. This, like many clichés, so lame and unexciting on the surface, actually expresses a great and terrible truth. It is not the least bit coincidental that adults who commit suicide with firearms almost always shoot themselves in the head. They shoot the terrible master. And the truth is that most of these suicides are actually dead long before they pull the trigger. And I submit that this is what the real, no bullshit value of your liberal arts education is supposed to be about. How to keep from going through your comfortable, prosperous, respectable adult life, dead, unconscious, a slave to your own head and to your natural default setting of being uniquely, completely, imperially alone, day in and day out. On empathy and kindness he spoke. Please don't think that I'm giving you moral advice, or that I'm saying you are supposed to think this way, or that anyone expects you to just automatically do it, because it is hard. It takes will and effort, and if you are like me, some days you won't be able to do it, or you just flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this fat, dead-eyed, over-made-up lady who just screamed at her kid in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 3 straight nights holding the hand of a husband who's dying of bone cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicle department who just yesterday helped your spouse resolve a horrific, infuriating red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but also not impossible. It just depends on what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure that you know what reality is, and you are operating on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. If you really learn how to pay attention, then you will know that there are other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that made the stars. Love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all things deep down. And then on what education really means and the art of being fully awake to the world, he said, the real value of a real education has almost nothing to do with knowledge, and everything to do with simple awareness. Simple awareness. Awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us, all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. This is water. It is unimaginably hard to do this, to stay conscious and alive in the adult world day in and day out. Which means yet another grand cliche turns out to be true. Your education really is the job of a lifetime. In Tom Bissell's book, Magic Hours, Essays on Creators and Creation, he writes on Wallace's suicide. The terrible master eventually defeated David Foster Wallace, which makes it easy to forget that none of the cloudlessly sane and true things he had to say about life in 2005 are any less sane or true today, however tragic the truth now seems. This is water does nothing to lessen the pain of Wallace's defeat. What it does is remind us of his strength and goodness and decency, the parts of him the terrible master could never defeat and never will. So that is, in just the speech of David Foster Wallace, this is water. And his conclusion that education, or the role of education, is or should be to teach us how to think. And in teaching us how to think, teach us how to have somehow a bit more control of how we think, control of our thinking and our emotion. And what it comes down to is to minute by minute by minute by minute have simple awareness. And then how he describes is how having that simple awareness is not an easy thing to have in this adult world that we live in. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, there was a bit more somber, a bit more heavy than usual. In the end, David Foster Wallace lost his battle with what he called the mind as a terrible master. But I think there's so much truth for us to learn from. Simple awareness. And maybe that is it. Maybe we don't need anything but simple awareness. Being able to look around and appreciate every little thing for what it is. And his summation there was looking at water and appreciating and recognizing it as water. And everything we get used to is so easy for us to glance over. I thought it was quite beautiful. Yeah, lots of food for thought there. I'll have something a bit lighter tomorrow, not so heavy. But I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that you had a great start to your week, and I hope that you're gonna have an amazing week ahead. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back again with story time tomorrow. And for those of you that enjoy the meditations, I'll be back with a meditation tomorrow as well. Hope you have a brilliant rest of your day. Ciao, ciao.